us this noon. Thank you.
The weight of the Chauvin verdict is being felt overseas as well. A prominent British activist and a UK minister were among the many who welcomed the guilty verdict.
This is not a time to be quiet or to think that finally we've got a result. No. This does not even begin to deal with healing Black men. It's a step in the right direction, but we must have real reform. You cannot reform racism. You can't reform white supremacy. We must eradicate institutional racism. We must eradicate white supremacy.
Joining us to talk about how we move the needle forward is Gerald Givens, Jr., the president of the Raleigh-Apex chapter of the NAACP. Mr. Givens, would you agree with what the activist said about now being the time to deal with healing Black people?
Absolutely. It's very important. You know, when you talk about healing, when you go to the doctor, the very first thing they want to do is they want to know your medical history. They want to find out your personal history as an individual. They want to find out what happened on your mother's side of the family and on your father's side of the family. And when you take a look at families like mine and George Floyd's, you'll see that my grandfather, Isaac Brown, was a slave, and his grandfather, Henry Stewart, was a slave. You'll find out that in his family history, at one time, they had over 500 acres of land that was stolen from them. And in my family, we had a store that was taken away from us, that our parents and our grandparents went to segregated schools. And now we're dealing with a society where gun violence is just out of control, deeply rooted in the Second Amendment, when Virginia would not accept the Second Amendment unless states had control over gun rights so that they can control the slaves.
The repercussions being felt for generations. Other commentators point to eradicating the power construct that fuels institutional racism. What do you think needs to happen next?
What I think what needs to happen next is that we continue to show these links between race, education, and gun violence. And then we work with our law enforcement agents. You know, I've had calls already from Deck Brown, Godwin, Desowich, Fonstock, Vance, Lickery, and Andrews. They're all saying, Gerald, we're all on the same team. Let's work together with our community. That's what it's going to take to create the change.
President Biden spoke to the nation last night. He said he hopes that this will help move the George Floyd Police Justice in Policing Act. Do you see that as the next step?
Yes, it is. It is a very, very important next step. It's not perfect, but it's a step in the right direction. That's where we need to go, forward, not backwards.
Gerald Givens, Jr., we appreciate your insight. Gerald is the president of the Raleigh-Apex chapter of the NAACP. Thank you so much for your perspective.
Thank you for having me.